Hi all, Taryn here. I know I usually don't do a face-on introduction, but today I woke up with 500 subscribers and I thought, oh, I should probably say thank you. You guys are awesome. I can't believe I'm at 500 subscribers. I can't wait to be, further down the line, but this is just super cool and I wanted to say thanks. And I really, really appreciate all of you liking and subscribing and sharing and commenting and just everything that you do. I really appreciate it. And in honor of that, we're going to be taking a little kind of detour-ish. I know I mentioned before that I was going to, paint fingers, sorry. Teach you guys how I do my decoupage papers, the ones that I make at my house. So that's what this video is. So if you'd like to see how to kind of do your own decoupage papers from home, keep watching.
All right, this is the print I decided on. It is kind of a watercolory look, so it's going to be easier to blend my paint into it. And then I'm using this scribble pad. It is seriously from the dollar store. I got it for my son and it's the thickness of newspaper. You can use tissue paper, but this is a little easier to work with, so this is what I'm going to show you guys because it'll be better to practice on. I have a large format printer, so I can use these larger sheets. If you can't, use 8.5 by 11, which is a typical printer. And then this is literally how I find my stuff. These are some of Paul's prints. I just go through. He has really, really easy to kind of blend in paints. So that's kind of the route that I like to go. And then literally it's just going down the rabbit hole until you find something that you like. I always pick artists that are well past the time of getting in trouble for using their stuff. So this is Rembrandt. He also has really, really great things to kind of blend in with a background. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm choosing a watercolor or when I'm choosing a print to use. Or I choose black and whites that are things that are easy for me to paint onto, if that makes sense. If you guys have seen my Alice in Wonderland table, that's what I'm talking about. And then I literally save the image to my phone and email it to myself so that I can put it on my computer. And then from my computer, I can then open it up into Photoshop and kind of mess with everything in there. So depending on the size print that I need for my piece, I try and get it as close as I can to what I need on my piece of furniture. I like to keep things in smaller sections just because you can see seams when you get them, especially with this paper because it's thicker than tissue paper. You can kind of paint them out and help, but you're still going to see seams. If that's something that bothers you, use tissue paper or do smaller areas where you only have to use one sheet of paper. But so here I size it to what I need. And then if I have to, like this, I needed to use 2 sheets of paper to print out the full size that I needed. So I'm going to have a seam on my piece, but I'm totally fine with that. And then I am just going to cut out the border around the edge there, like you do. And then I'll line them up to see, where the seam's going to be. If you want to, you can cut them exactly on the edge and not overlap at all, and then the seam will be much smaller and less noticeable. However, if you mess up at all, you will see a break in the papers. So I always overlap, even though it would look better if I didn't. It just makes me nervous to think that there might be a break in the papers. So, you kind of make your choices and that's what you have to live with. So here I'm just deciding on kind of what placement I want on my piece. So this has been fully primed. You do want to have a lighter color in the background. My primer is a light gray, so I can totally use this in the background. If you're not using primer, just use a white or a light gray paint or something the like. Unless you have super light wood without, sharp grain, you can just do it over that. But typically you'll want a solid light base to work with. Now, I use Chalk Mountain Poly. You can use any kind of poly, anything that you want that you enjoy using to apply your papers with, that's totally fine. I always use satin poly just because I know it works. It's usually the finish that I'm going to go with on the piece anyways. It's my favorite finish, and it's not going to reactivate. Once it's dry, it dries pretty hard, and it would take a lot of water to reactivate it. Whereas if you use something like Mod Podge, it just takes a little bit of water and it kind of reactivates it, and it's not really the best situation. So I'm just here figuring out how far over I need to go with the poly. I do quite a thick layer, and I'm not worried about it getting in between the drawers right there because I can clean all that up later. I'm not terribly worried about it. I just want to make sure that I get a decent layer on there, and then also a little extra around the edges because you don't want any edges popping up or lifting over time. And this piece is perfect because it has a frame, and anytime you can get something with a frame on it like that, ooh, it's lovely. So nice. So this is how I'm applying it, literally just laying it on, kind of matching it up into the frame as far over in the edges as I can go and smushing it down with my hands. What's nice about this is it's not the tissue paper, so you can be a little, I'm going to say rough, but you know, a little bit rougher with this than you can be with tissue paper. Tissue paper wants to rip and tear and do all that stuff. Well, it actually does look better in the end than the newspaper thickness paper. This one is a lot easier to work with. So I'm just kind of getting this on there, and it's kind of lined up, and then we're just going to slice it anyway. So it's not a huge deal. I just wanted to get it on all 3 drawers first, and then I'll slice through the drawers. So if your paper is too wet with the poly, it will be harder and you could potentially rip the paper. So keep that in mind as you're going. Go slow, take your time. If there's a little bit of excess in between, don't worry about it. We'll get it handled. It's not a big deal. And then I'm just using my brayer to smush this down. This process I do on the next sheet as well, but for the sake of time and you guys not wanting to have to sit here and look through all of this, know that every step that I'm doing to this side, I'm going to do to the other side as well when I apply it, but I cut it short so that you don't have to sit through all of it. So here I'm going through and making sure that on the edges and corners there, especially because we just cut it, I want to make sure that any place that there is the potential of lifting, I add extra poly and get it really, really suctioned down there. I don't want anything lifting later on. And if you see teeny tiny bubbles and any wrinkles or anything like that, kind of fix them as much as you can, but know that when this dries, it will kind of shrink down and suction kind of in on itself, and a lot of those will go away, which is lovely. So you'll want to do like a practice piece if you've never done this before, but it will most likely turn out okay. So you can see tiny wrinkles in there as I'm cutting off this little trim. It's pretty close there. Those will actually be gone at the end of this once it dries out. So see, I cut off that little extra piece of paper there. I want it to be almost less than flush. I'm doing it at an angle to get off that extra piece of trim, and then I'm going back in with the poly and reapplying it, making sure there's a thick layer there. You want your edges really sealed in. And then I'm going over the whole thing again with more poly, and that's also going to seal everything in. All around the edges, especially where the drawers come in and out, you want to get extra poly around that, get, you know, everything in. I don't know if I can say that enough times. Just make sure it's fully sealed with poly, or whatever medium that you're using. Just know that I prefer using poly. Right, and as I'm going over it with the brush, since it's now wet on top with the additional poly over the top, you can also kind of use your brush to manipulate the paper a little bit. So don't be afraid to do that. It's actually really gentle, so it's just a good thing to use there. And then again, same process on the bottom drawer. I'm going in kind of at an angle. I don't know if you can see that, but it's going to create less of a lip from the paper to the drawer. So doing that, and then of course adding more poly, pulling it back. And don't be afraid to pull this back. It's, like I said, it's a little bit thicker than tissue paper, so you can't. Tissue paper, there's no way you can pull it back. Once it's on there, it's on there. But with this, you can kind of pull it back a little bit and get extra poly in there to seal it up. All right, now for the right side, it's the same exact process. This one you just have to be a little bit more careful with just because you're lining up the papers. So this one went on just a little bit wonkier than the first side because the first side's easy. You're laying it down and it doesn't really matter. But here you have to kind of line it up and it's not fitting in the frame like the first side because it's going to be lifted because it sits over the edge there, and then I'm going to have to cut it back. So it doesn't lay down as neatly as the first side. Don't worry about it. Like I said, it's gonna have a little bit of bubbles and wrinkles and everything like that. I'm not worried about it. It's going to shrink down as soon as it dries and we get everything on here. So I just cut through the drawers, and then once I get it kind of tucked in, I'm using my nail to scrape it, kind of push it down into the edge there. And you can score it a little bit and then it comes right off. It's super, super easy. Again, you are doing this a little more gently. I have this sped up so that it doesn't take, so long for you to sit and watch it. So it is sped up. So take your time, do it slowly because you don't want to rip your paper, but it's very easy to do if you have a little bit of patience. And see, I'm not worried about any of those wrinkles right now. They're still sitting there. Everything's going to be okay. So now that we have them all cut out and fit in, I'm going over with the brayer, and then if it's not pushing things out the way that I like, I'm gonna lift the paper a little bit and add some more poly and get it resituated. Again, you wanna be very gentle when you're doing this because the paper is a little bit wet and it makes it a little bit more fragile. But if you do it very gingerly, you can get it up without messing anything up, add more poly and smooth it back down. And it's still gonna have a little bit of wrinkles in it, but by the end, it'll look grand. And see, it just tore a little bit right there. You can't see that. It's all fixed. Don't worry about it. I think the trick is with this is to just not panic. I found that when I used to do this in the beginning, I panicked a lot, and it's no way to be. It's no way to live. Okay, so here I couldn't get it up, the paper up in that spot, so all I did was put a slice in the paper and then added more poly underneath it, and then of course I'm sealing it down. As you can see, there's wrinkles and bubbles in it. I'm sealing it down just like that. Everything will be okay. I'm also using the brush kind of as a brayer right here and smoothing down and getting it down as much as possible. And then I'm going to do this process on both the other two drawers. And then when I'm finished, after you let it sit and dry, you're hardly going to notice any of that stuff. It's coming up. See, that's it dry. It actually shrinks back and pulls the wrinkles and bubbles out, which is lovely. Mind you, if you get really, really close, you can still see them, but it looks pretty good. So here I just go over all of my colors, the ones that I think would suit this piece, and then I start painting it in. And if you want to see that, you got to stick around for Saturday's video. That's right, Saturday, not Tuesday, because it is a huge collaboration with the other YouTubers, which I mentioned in my previous video. So if you want to see how this dresser turns out, tune in that day, Saturday. Otherwise, I will see you on Tuesday, which is my normal uploading day. And seriously, thank you guys again so much for everything. And see you next time.